Today's lesson is the science behind cilantro hate. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're talking about food, and we're specifically talking about a kind of herb or a spice that you can add to your food. It's quite common here in Taiwan, and it's called cilantro, or 香菜, as you call it in Chinese. Now, I remember when I first came to Taiwan, I thought the smell of it was really bad, really horrible, and eventually, though, after time, I got used to it, and now I can appreciate it as a flavor. Are you a big fan of cilantro, Mike?
I don't mind it. I mean, it's not one of the things I will absolutely have to have if it's not available, but also if it's on the dish, I won't pick it out. I really don't mind it too much. But my wife, on the other hand, she is definitely a cilantro hater. Can't stand the stuff. She'll pick out little green leaves on top of her food when she sees it there. My wife is definitely in one of the hater clubs, for sure, for cilantro.
Yeah, the first time I had it, I think, was with yo-yu gung, as you call it here, a squid stew or something like that. And it was rather an unusual experience to try cilantro then, but over the years I've gotten more used to it. So let's talk about the science behind it. Yeah, why do we like it? Why can we tolerate it? And why can your wife not tolerate it? I guess there's some science behind this, so let's find out what this is all about. Let's listen to the first part right now.
The science behind cilantro hate. Cilantro is a common herb that can add a fresh, lemony flavor to dishes from a variety of cuisines. It contains plenty of vitamins and may even help fight infections and reduce inflammation. However, while some people love eating cilantro, others can't stand it. Why do opinions on the herb differ so dramatically?
大家好，第一部分介绍名词 herb。也可以念为 herb， 它的意思是香草或是药草的意思。例如 Margaret likes to use lots of fresh herbs in her cooking. Margaret 喜欢在烹饪中使用大量的新鲜香草。或者 Rita grows many types of herbs in her garden. Rita 在她的花园里种植了多种药草。接着看到这个名词 infection， 表示病毒或细菌引起的感染或是传染病。例如This medicine should quickly clear up the infection. 这种药应该能迅速治好感染。或是 I got an infection after cutting my finger. 我割伤手指后感染了。
Okay, so we've got the science behind something, or the science that supports something. For example, we've got people who say that there's global warming or climate change, and then they point to various studies and statistics, and that's the science behind something, the science or the scientific research that supports a particular position.
Exactly, using science to kind of explain or investigate or to learn more about a certain topic. So let's learn more about cilantro and specifically cilantro hate. I don't think these are people who are actively protesting politically against cilantro. We're not trying to get it banned from the country or made illegal, but it's just people who really don't like it, who really can't stand it, people like my wife who will actually pick it out of their food. We could say they hate cilantro. Of course, hate is a very strong word. It just kind of means, in this case, you dislike it. It's something you're not a fan of, and you definitely wouldn't order it or have it in your food if you're making your own dish. So let's find out about it. It says cilantro is a common herb that can add a fresh, lemony flavor to dishes from a variety of cuisines. Yeah, this is obviously why a lot of people like it, that fresh, lemony flavor. Something lemony is reminiscent. It reminds you of the lemon flavor, but obviously it's not exactly lemon, but it gives you that certain sourness, that certain nice tartness that people like from lemon. In this case, though, lemon, of course, being a fruit, these are actually herbs. Cilantro is an herb, which is a plant that is grown and added to food in order to enhance or change or basically do something good to the flavor of your food. If you're eating something and you feel it's a little boring or bland, as we might say, to talk about sort of dull or tasteless food, add in some herbs either when you're cooking or later on, and you will have all sorts of new wonderful flavors. And this can definitely enhance a variety of cuisines. When we talk about a cuisine, we're basically talking about a food style or a food genre, if you kind of want to use a word from another area of life. But a food style often based on where the food comes from, who makes it, what culture the food is from, and how it's been introduced to world cuisines, or all the different global styles of cooking.
Exactly. For example, you may go down to Miaoli and have some Hakka cuisine at a restaurant there or whatever. I did want to mention also the word herb is sometimes pronounced herb. Some people say it that way. I think the North American pronunciation is mostly herb. So yes, cilantro is a common herb and you can add it to food, but yeah, it does have this lemony flavor. If you like it, it has another flavor if you don't like it, which we'll talk about in a second here. It contains plenty of vitamins and may even help fight infections and reduce inflammation. So if it contains lots of vitamins and maybe minerals, we could say it's quite nutritious and it's helpful to the body. It can fight infections. That's when bacteria gets in your body and causes problems, or it can also reduce inflammation. When things kind of get bigger and bigger, you kind of have a buildup of fluid and things like that. That is inflammation.
Okay, that's interesting. So there are some medical benefits to eating cilantro, apparently, which is nice to know if you do enjoy the flavor of it. But there is a downside to this wonderful herb. However, while some people love eating cilantro, others can't stand it. Yes, so if you love something, then you really enjoy it. If you can't stand it, you really don't like it. You might say, I hate it, I dislike it. It is really not my cup of tea. So they can't stand it. They really don't like the taste of cilantro. So here's the big question. Why do opinions on the herb differ so dramatically? Yeah, it's not one of those things like, well, it's okay, but I don't love it. No, some people, like again, my wife, will actually pick it out of the food because it really ruins the flavor of the rest of the dish that they're eating. It is that strong and it is that unappealing, and it is something they really don't want to be tasting. So why is that? Well, we're going to turn to the world of science and genetics, actually, to find out. So let's get an explanation from the second part of our article. It seems that genetics may play a key role. Research suggests that people who dislike cilantro have a specific genetic variant that affects a gene called OR6A2. This gene is responsible for detecting certain aldehyde compounds, which are found in cilantro. Unfortunately, these compounds also happen to be found in soap. And it turns out that people with the OR6A2 variant are more likely to perceive cilantro's aldehydes as soapy instead of lemony.
第二部分看到名词 genetics， 指遗传特性、基因组成，也可以是遗传学的意思。例如 Genetics plays a crucial role in determining an individual's physical traits. 遗传特性对于决定个人的外貌特征至关重要。也可以说 Genetics helps explain how traits are passed from parents to offspring. 遗传学帮助解释了特征是如何从父母遗传给后代的。下一个介绍名词 variant， 表示变体、变异或是变种。我们可以说 The scientists discovered a new variant of the virus in a remote region. 科学家在偏远地区发现了一种新的病毒变种。又或者说 The team developed a vaccine effective against multiple variants of the disease. 团队开发了一种对多种疾病变体有效的疫苗。继续看到名词Compound 意思是化合物或是混合物。例如 A compound is made up of several different molecules. 化合物是由不同的分子组成。再看一个例子 Steel is a compound made from iron and carbon. 钢是由铁和碳制成的混合物。
Okay, so again, we're trying to answer the question, why do some people love cilantro and why do some people hate cilantro? And then why do some people just like it a little bit and don't hate it at all, like Mike and myself? We don't really necessarily love it, but we can certainly appreciate it as a flavoring or as an herb. Well, it seems that genetics may play a key role. So genetics has to do with genes, okay? So genes, of course, are in your body. I think the Chinese is just gene. That's how we translate it. It's the little codes in your DNA or whatever. And it affects different parts of your personality. It affects the kind of hair color you have, the size of your eyes, etc. It all has to do with genetics. And yes, genetics can play a key role. It is responsible for whether people love cilantro or whether they hate it.
And of course, genetics is also something that is passed down from parent to child and so forth through the family line through generations. So some of these things, like the chances of you getting cancer or certain diseases, that also has a lot to do with your genetics. In other words, there's nothing you can really do to change it in your own life. It's just the way you were made. It says research suggests that people who dislike cilantro have a specific genetic variant that affects a gene called OR6A2. All right, well, that's obviously a very scientific term for this one specific genetic variant. And a variant is basically a variation of something. When we say there are various things or there are variations, we're talking about different types, different kinds, or different variants. There's a lot similar with these different variants, but there are noticeable differences. We can talk about different breeds of cats or dogs as different variants of the common cat and the common dog, right? We can have tall dogs, short dogs, dogs with long legs, dogs with short faces, all that type of stuff. They're all different types of dogs or variants. And of course, genes, because your parents get together and make a baby, and then you get together with another person from a completely different family, and you have children, there will be a lot of this variation going on, these different variants being created through genetics.
Right, and the verb, of course, is to vary, to be different in different places, like the American accent varies according to where you are. Down south, they'll talk like this. In New York, they're going to talk like this. So those are variants of the American dialect, I guess you could say. And yes, we've got genetic variants in genes here. This one, again, is called OR6A2. You don't have to memorize that, but it's pretty impressive if you do. And this gene is responsible for detecting certain aldehyde compounds, which are found in cilantro. So here we've got the verb phrase to be responsible for something. That is the cause of something. It's often used if we talk about someone's job, like I'm responsible for hiring new employees, for example. That's my duty. That's what I'm supposed to do. But this particular gene is what causes the like or hate of cilantro. And yes, indeed, it's due to these aldehyde compounds. A compound is like two or more different chemicals in the same sort of place, and they have different effects depending on which situation you find them in.
All right, so that is found in cilantro, these different aldehyde compounds, and depending on your genetics, yes, you either like them or do not like them. Unfortunately, he says these compounds also happen to be found in soap. Ah, okay, so there might actually be a lot of good reasons behind why certain people don't like it. Some of these aldehyde compounds, which give cilantro its unique taste, are also found in soap, and that is actually a word that a lot of people who don't like cilantro will use to describe that flavor that they find so unappealing. It's very soapy, they might say, right? It tastes like I'm licking soap or eating soap or got some soap in my mouth. And that is unfortunate. That's kind of bad news or bad luck for people who are stuck with this genetic variant, because it means you can't learn to like cilantro the way you can learn to like certain unusual foods. It's just part of who you are. So that is a bit of bad news for them. And it turns out, it says that people with the OR6A2 variant are more likely to perceive cilantro's aldehydes as soapy instead of lemony. So there you go. Their genetics are, I don't know if you'd say playing a trick on their brain, or at least making their brain appreciate things in different ways. It turns out. So that is the result. That's what happens. That is what we see in the real world. We don't see these people with a genetic variant, but we see what happens. And it means that these people perceive perceive. When you perceive something, that is basically what your senses are telling you about that thing, what you see, what you hear, what you feel as well. If you have a couple of different people watching a certain event taking place, depending on who they are and their experiences and all sorts of other differences between them, they will perceive, they will experience, they will take in this event in slightly different ways, which is why different people have, of course, different tastes and different opinions and things like that. So people with this OR6A2, they're tasting a very soapy type of taste when they are eating cilantro. And obviously, most people don't like to eat soap, so it's clear that if cilantro seems soapy, it wouldn't be your favorite thing on the menu. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll come back. Different rates of cilantro dislike among different ethnic groups also suggest that genetics may be behind the hatred of cilantro. Specifically, one study found that 21% of East Asians and 17% of Caucasians dislike cilantro. In contrast, only 7% of South Asians and 4% of Hispanics feel the same. So, if you or someone you know can't stand the taste of cilantro, it might not be simply a personal choice. Your genes may be to blame.
第三部分看到形容词 ethnic， 它表示种族的或是民族的，可以说 The artist's music reflects a variety of ethnic influences. 那位艺术家的音乐反映出各种民族的影响。也可以说 The island is home to several different ethnic groups. 这座岛是好几个不同民族的原生地。最后看到 hatred 这个单字，它是名词，指的是仇恨或是敌意。举例来说 While there are many things I don't like, I don't have a hatred for anything. 虽然我有很多不喜欢的东西，但我没有对任何事物怀有憎恨。或者 Ellen has a hatred of spiders, and she leaves the room every time she sees one. Ellen 憎恨蜘蛛，她每次看到蜘蛛就离开房间。
Okay, let's talk about the third part of today's lesson. Remember, we talked about this variant in genes, OR6A2, and depending on whether you have it or not, it will affect the flavor of cilantro. It could be lemony or it could be like soap. Here it says different rates of cilantro dislike among different ethnic groups also suggest that genetics may be behind the hatred of cilantro. Okay, so we've got different dislikes or likes for cilantro according to different ethnic groups. Okay, so if we're talking about ethnic groups, we're talking about different kinds of people like Hispanics, blacks, Asians, etc. Those are different ethnic groups. And yes, because different people from different parts of the world and from different cultures and different ethnic groups, they often have different reactions to cilantro that therefore suggests that genetics may be responsible for this. The genetics may be responsible for the hatred or the love of cilantro. Hatred, of course, is when you really hate something and you don't like it at all.
Specifically, we read one study found that 21% of East Asians and 17% of Caucasians dislike cilantro. All right, so these would appear to be the groups with the strongest levels of dislike among them of cilantro. In fact, it's the worst for East Asians, where 21%, I mean, that's a significant number. That's 1 out of 5 people, basically, dislike cilantro, or at least are born with this gene that would mean that they probably do. And also 17% of Caucasians, or white people, European people, people with lighter skin and lighter colored hair, 17% of them dislike cilantro, which, you know, I guess isn't too surprising since cilantro is still seen as a rather exotic ingredient in European and Western cooking.
In contrast to the fact that so many East Asians and Caucasians don't like cilantro, in contrast, or the opposite of that, is that only 7% of South Asians and 84% of Hispanics feel the same.
Interesting.
So, of course, South Asians, those are people from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, places like that. And yes, indeed, they probably have a lot of cilantro in their dishes, so they're probably used to it. But also, Hispanics are people like from Mexico or Cuba or Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Chile, etc., places like that. Those are Hispanics. And they seem to like cilantro. They don't seem to hate it as much as white people and East Asians do.
There you go. So, if you or someone you know can't stand the taste of cilantro, it might not be simply a personal choice. Your genes may be to blame. So there you go. Don't get mad at someone if they dislike cilantro. Don't try to convince them it's good by cooking it in different ways in different dishes. It's kind of like trying to get a dog to appreciate opera. Maybe it just doesn't have the ability to do it. That's okay. There's many other wonderful herbs out there that you can choose. And you can also ease off on your cilantro-hating friend. It's just the way they were made, and that's okay.
Okay, so there you have it. The reasons why some people like it and the reasons why some people don't. And maybe if you like it, you can head down to your local night market and get a dish of squid stew. I'm sure they'll put some cilantro on there, but they will hold it back if you don't want it, okay? Here comes Hanny, our beloved Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 今天的文章是关于香菜 cilantro。 那我们来看看文章里面的5个题目。我们看到第一题，空格逗号 While some people love eating cilantro, others can't stand it。 题目意思就是说，空格有些人喜欢吃香菜，但有些人无法忍受。那这题是考我们具有转折功能的副词。先来看选项 A however 是然而但是， B otherwise否则不然或是以其他方式的意思， C furthermore 表示此外而且， D accordingly 表示相应地或是照着还有因此的意思。那题目空格前一句提到香菜含有大量的维生素，能帮助对抗感染和减少发炎，而后文则提到有些人喜欢吃香菜，但有些人无法忍受。那我们推断空格里面要填入可以表达对比的副词，最适合选项就会是 A however。 第二题是 This gene is 空格 detecting certain aldehyde compounds which are found in cilantro。 题目意思是这个基因空格侦测某些醛类化合物，而这些化合物可以在香菜中找到。我们看看选项 A keen on 表达热衷于什么，着迷什么， B different from 表示不同于什么， C inferior to 表示劣于什么什么， D responsible for 表示负责什么什么。好，课文前一句提到说，研究显示不喜欢香菜的人拥有一种特定的基因变异，这种变异会影响一种叫做 OR6A2 的基因。那从语义上来判断，它应该是要进一步说明这个基因负责侦测某些醛类化合物。那最适合选项就是 D responsible for， 其他3个选项语义都不符合。再看到第3题，他写到空格逗号 These compounds also happen to be found in soap。 题目意思就是空格这些化合物也刚好存在于肥皂中。好，那这题考我们字汇，4个选项都是副词。那选项 A obviously 表示显然显而易见地， B unfortunately 是不幸地遗憾的是， C supposedly 表示据说据推测， D eventually 表示最终终于或者是最后。空格前一句它有提到 OR6A2 这个基因呢，负责侦测某些醛类化合物，而这些化合物可以在香菜中找到。那空格后方又提到这些化合物也刚好存在于肥皂中。那对于不喜欢香菜的人来说，这是一个令人遗憾的事实，因为这可能导致他们把香菜味道联想到肥皂味。所以从语义上来看，最适合的副词会是 B unfortunately。再来看到第4题 And it 空格 that people with the OR6A2 variant are more likely to perceive cilantro's aldehydes as soapy instead of lemony。 题目意思是空格拥有 OR6A2 基因变异的人比较可能将香菜的醛类化合物感知为肥皂味而不是柠檬味。这题是考我们片语动词，来看选项 A works out 表示奏效， B adds up 表示说得通， C turns up 表达现身露面 D turns out 可以表达结果发现怎么样，原来是怎么样。从上下文判断最适合答案会是 D turns out。当我们用 It turns out that 点点点就可以表达结果发现怎么样怎么样，所以这课文句子就是要表达结果发现拥有 OR6A2 基因变异的人比较可能将香菜的醛类化合物感知为肥皂味而不是柠檬味。那其他3个选项在这边语义都不符合。我们看到第5题是 Different rates of cilantro dislike among different ethnic groups also suggest that genetics behind the hatred of cilantro。 题目意思是说不同种族对香菜的厌恶程度不同，这也显示基因厌恶香菜背后的原因。这题考我们时态，来看选项 A may be B would be C must have been D could have been。 好，那题目句子是在推测基因可能是厌恶香菜的原因，所以这边最适合答案是用 A may be 来表达可能是怎么样。那么选项 B would be 通常是用于假设语气或者是描述未来的可能性，这边不符合句意。那么选项 C must have been 和 D could have been 都是在描述过去的假设，也不符合句意，所以我们的答案就会选择 A may be。好，那么以上今天讲解，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Herb. Phil added some fresh herbs to the soup to improve the flavor. Cuisine. Rhonda enjoys exploring different cuisines when traveling abroad. Infection. Washing your hands often can help prevent infections. Genetics. The genetics of this plant allow it to survive in dry climates. Compound. Water is a chemical compound made of hydrogen and oxygen. Perceive. Noel is generally perceived to be a strong and independent leader. Ethnic. The museum features exhibits on the traditions and customs of various ethnic groups. Hatred. Hatred between the two groups led to years of conflict.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.